Good morning, everyone. We are the Group 5, and this morning we will be discussing our assigned topic. Before anything else, let me first introduce myself and my co-members. I am Marishane Anastasio. Together with me are Drisel Arnaiz, Hairana Asta, Hajimar Hamlod, Eunice Marcelino, Tads Mahal Mohammed, and Michelle Solis. Before we will commence to our discussion, let us first have an activity. This activity is entitled Guess the Picture. So obviously, you only need to guess what the picture describes or shows. So for the first item, what do you think the picture depicts? Yes, you're correct. The answer is reader. How about this one? Yes, the answer is response. For the last item, yes, great job. The answer is criticism. Thank you for participating, everyone. If we will combine all those words that we answered in the activity, then we will be able to form a reader response criticism. So this morning, we will be discussing the reader response approach or criticism. In our presentation for today, we will discuss these four main subtopics. Firstly, the historical context, followed by making a reader response. Then we have writing a reading response analysis. And finally, the example. Now let us proceed to the discussion proper. So what is reader response approach or reader response criticism? So reader response approach or reader response criticism focuses on reader's response to literary text or work, in which the name reader response tells the story. So it's a broad area of literary studies which helps us to learn about our reading processes as well as involving one's experience. In addition, according to Spirovska and Dean in her paper, reader response approach emphasized the crucial role of the reader on the literary and the aesthetic experience when reading a literary text. So, the reader's way of understanding receptions of a literary text, as well as the experience of the reader as a reader influence or interaction between the reader and the text. So this interaction contributes to the development of interpretation of the text and reconstruction of the ideas expressed in the text. So that's all for the reader response criticism. Now, may I call on the next presenter, Miss Eunice, to discuss the historical background.
Good day everyone, I am Erica Ines L. Marcelino and today I will be discussing about the historical background of the reader response approach or criticism. To start off, of course, it is normal that every reader always has a response to what they are reading or what they have read. But with the arrival of reader response analysis or criticism, the audience was expected to shake off its deference to the authority of the text and become an active participant in the creation of meaning. That kind of process was considered the worst fear of the formalist because the work had already moved away. Due to this approach or criticism, no work or reading can be considered unbiased and objective. The reader had already moved to the center stage or the center of the work. Through this criticism or approach, we are capable to persuade and move individuals to convince on a certain text or piece. It is stated that Plato and Aristotle were aware of the power of words to steer or convince people, though they do not hold the same opinion towards it. The use of literature can arouse people's emotions and strengthen its capabilities in doing so. Aristotle have explored and wanted to find out many ways in which an argument can be made convincing to the listener. He came up to influence Longinus, Cicero, Quintilian, and other rhetoricians to making choices about organization and style so that what they have to say will appear convincing to other people or a particular group of people. The recent derivation of reader-response approach can be found or traced to the work of I.A. Richards in 1920s and Louis Rosenblatt in 1930s. In line with Richard, his analysis have showed him that there can be a wide of varieties of interpretations by a group of readers because he have observed it himself that when he have given his students at Cambridge University the opportunity to respond to a short poem, each one came up with different responses. However, Richard have backed out to becoming a theorist to this approach because he have categorized that the students' responses was based by their accuracy and that he have ranked each responses depending to the closeness of the correct interpretation. Moving on, let's talk about Rosenblatt, which happened in the 1930s next to Richard. Rosenblatt was ignored by readers who are pursuing formalist principles of criticism when her first works was published. She explained that a given text is not always read at the same way because we interpret it differently. It varies with purpose, needs, experience, and concerns of the readers. In simple words, Rosenblatt highlights that it is with the reader to choose and concentrate on the information to be extracted on a certain writing and aesthetic, which includes the senses and feeling of what is being lived through during the reading event. Rosenblatt also stated that a piece of literature comes into being by merging the reader and the text. Both the work of Richard and Rosenblatt received a renewed attention when Walker Gibson and Wayne Booth have raised a question about the roles readers play in the mid-20th century. Gibson have pointed out that a text asked a reader to become what he called a back reader. A reader becomes a participant in the creative act by playing the role the writer has designed for him or her. Moreover, both have recognized that a writer controls a reader through rhetorical strategies, but he did not go as far from that. The question was simply put as does an interpretation of a text depend primarily on the reader, on the text itself, or a combination of the two? More questions asked as what is a text? Is the reader the book holder, the reader conceptualized by the writer, or an ideal reader? To cut it short, reader response critiques or approach does not answer questions with a single idea but covers such a wide variety of concerns that sometimes seen as a chaotic jumble of theories that may or may not have anything to do with each other. Interpretation of meaning is assumed to be an act of reading. Through this kind of criticism, notice how a literary work becomes an evolving creation in society. Remember that there is no one true interpretation in a literary criticism, no right and wrong answer, but a variety of ideas that comes up from individuals' feelings and experiences. Reader response criticism calls for reflection of one's own value and beliefs. Lastly, in the year 1960s, a certain theory became known and so it was called the reception theory, where it recognizes that readers in different historical periods are not likely to interpret or judge a work in the same way or manner. That would be all for the historical background of reader response criticism. Let us move on to the next presenter. Thank you for listening.
Good day. So at this juncture, we shall proceed to our next discussion, which is making a reader's response. Okay, so without further ado, let us begin. So a reader's response strategy may be shockingly different from the approach that some people are used to. You will be asked to seek inside and around yourself for ways to make the work meaningful, rather than memorizing historical information, recognizing literary forms and techniques, or acquiring a given interpretation. Okay, so although the reader is always the center of attention, there are numerous ways to consider the reader's connection with the text. Okay, so Rosenblatt explains two of them before recommending that they collaborate in a process she calls transactional analysis. She explains the reader interprets or act on the text in the actual reading event, or the text causes a reaction or act on the reader. However, each of these phrasings distorts the real reading process since it indicates a single line of action by one separate element or another. And finally, the reader-text relationship is not a straight line. It is a situation, an event at a particular time and place in which each element conditions the other. Okay, so it will be useful to analyze how the two linear processes function in preparation for constructing a transactional analysis that illustrates how the reader and the text join together to generate meaning. Okay, so that is how the text controls the reader and how the reader makes the text. Okay, now we shall discuss the text act on the reader. Okay, so when you look at how a text manipulates the reader's responses, you'll see that it's a strong tool. As Henry James once said, in every novel, the work is divided between the writer and the reader. But the writer makes the reader very much as he makes his characters. Okay, so examining a text to understand how it affects a reader is similar to the structuralist approach as we have discussed in chapter 8. Okay, so both reader response critics and structuralists argue that readers detect signs that they are accustomed to seeing in a work because they come to it with a specific literary competence, or what Jonathan Cooler called a set of shared reading conventions. Okay, so they then make the predicted interpretation based on those signals or signs. Now, they make new interpretations based on the familiar clues. As a result, examining the text to see how it affects readers to behave in certain ways entails determining how the codes, signs, signals, and rules interact to form meaning. If the meaning of a book is recognized because informed readers are aware of the basic conventions, then it cannot be subject to an unlimited number of interpretations. This means that it is more necessary for readers to make generalizations about how the text interpretation is constrained by the system under which was produced than it is for them to record their personal responses. Okay, so although structuralist critics acknowledge that readers will yield different interpretations, they concentrate on the patterns they discover in readers' techniques. Okay, so it is crucial to understand that an author can sometimes trick the reader by employing well-known cliches. A text can employ predictable responses such as the expectations produced by specific genre to encourage readers to adopt conclusions that later show to be incorrect. As Stanley Fish pointed out by Scene in 1998, a text can use predictable responses such as expectations typically evoked by a particular genre to cause readers to make interpretations that later prove them wrong. Okay, that later prove to be wrong. Now, if you want to know how the text influences your response, look at how it shows you what you should be thinking and feeling as the story unfolds. This can entail thinking about the author's intent on how it was carried out. It will be very certainly necessitate a detailed examination of each aspect of the work for clues about the reader's behavior. Okay, so that's it. The text acts on the reader. Now here's the other one. The reader acts on the text. All of your thoughts, experiences, imaginations, and belief play a part in establishing meaning when the focus is focused directly on the reader as the primary source of interpretation. Okay, so expectations, preconceptions, stock responses, values, personal experiences, gender, age, etc., and even the conditions of the current reading will all be brought to a text by you. These forces, according to Norman Holland, make a given work serve highly personal, even idiosyncratic ends. Okay? Again, highly personal, even idiosyncratic ends. Okay, so each of us acquires a basic identity from our mother, according to Holland, which employs psychology to explain the process of reading. It is our understanding of who we are as individuals. When we read, we play our identity theme by recreating the text in our image, similar to how a musical theme might have changes while remaining core to ourselves. We utilize literary works to represent and eventually to imitate ourselves. We discover ways to cope with fears and desires hidden deep within our own psyches. As we do so, um, yes, as we do so. As a result, responses vary as much as response as personalities. Okay, so no two persons will approach a text in the same way or reach the same level of comprehension. That isn't to suggest that text doesn't have its own set of topics and organization. However, any interpretations of them is at the end of the day subjective. Okay, so a text, according to David Bleach, and he argued that a text does not exist outside of its reader or readers who are observers rather than discovering meaning in a text. Readers build meaning for it. Thus, wherever is provided as a objective interpretation has its foundations in human response. The process starts with the individual, but it is then shaped communally through questioning, challenging, and amending in a group setting. Okay, so what becomes known as fact, the meaning that is developed, he says, is determined by the needs of the community. Okay, so effective stylistics, as Stanley Fish calls his approach, contends that readers develop a text as they read it, word by word and phrase by sentence. He's concerned in how readers' reactions change as words and phrases follow one another, or how the style influences the reader. Interpretation, according to Fish, is the result of interpretative communities or groups of informed, linguistically competent readers who read and generate meaning based on shared assumptions and practices. He rejects that there is such a thing as a person. Okay, so we've all internalized interpretative procedures based on preconceptions about literature that have come from our institutions and cultural groups. According to Fish, a reader does not produce an individual response that is amended by negotiation with other readers' answers. Rather, she makes a response that is the product of a larger community of readers who share certain assumptions about how to read a text from the beginning. A text is not interpreted by readers in these ways. It's something that they make. Okay, so now we shall proceed to the next topic.
The majority of reader-response critics do not consider how a book affects or generates the reader separately. Instead, they are more likely to use both perspectives in tandem. They work under the assumption that literature is generated when two shapers of meaning collide. So, the poetry cannot be equated merely with either the text or the experience of a reader. So, as Susan Bell contended, rather it is the interplay between both. So, the former acts as a template, limiting the reader can do with it. The latter is expected to fill in the blank stereotypes and vision and be co-producer of the text in general. Wolfgang Iser, a German phenomenologist, proposed another explanation for the relationship between reader and the text, claiming that nothing can be separated from the mind that knows it. So, as a result, the reader and the text become collaborators in the creation of meaning. A literary work, according to Iser, is an international act of the writer's consciousness, an artistic effort that is then re-experienced by a reader who engages in a aesthetic endeavor. The text provides the necessary elements and sets the parameters for the creative act of reading. It establishes an implied reader for itself and employs particular patterns for predisposition, the actual reader, who brings his own set of experience to the process of reading the text to respond in the same way as the implied reader. The text involves the reader's imagination in the task of thinking things out for himself, influencing the effect of what has been written as reader give life to the material supplied by the text as they cope with its indeterminacy, which is generated by the missing material and information. If the work is successful, it does not provide too much or too little information, but rather guides readers towards self-discovery.
Hello everyone, my name is Michelle Isolis and I will be discussing about writing a reader response analysis. Reader response analysis is a school of literary theory that focuses on the reader or the audience and their experience of a literary work in contrast to the other schools and theories that focus attention primarily on the author or the content and form of the work. Pre-writing is the first stage of the writing process, typically followed by drafting, revision, editing, and publishing. Pre-writing can consist of a combination of outlining, diagramming, storyboarding, and clustering. For a technique similar to clustering, see mind mapping. To find a starting point for exploring where your personal experience and the text converge, you will find it helpful to make a few personal observations before, during, and after reading the text. This observation will help you discover interpretive points for discussion. It is easy to begin simply ask questions such as this before you even pick up the book. First is, how do I feel about reading this piece? Am I eager to begin? Curious about what I will find? Reluctant? What do I already know about this work or this author? What do I already know about the time, place, or characters depicted? What does the title suggest to me? Those are the questions that might help you. Noting your responses in a journal or log during a first reading can help you make generalizations later. You may still be at the questioning stage when you do this, or your ideas may have reached an advanced degree of development. Regardless of how far along you are in your thinking, here are some suggestions to consider during the initial reading. Does the work include quotations that I would like to copy and save? What questions would I like to ask the author? What objections can I raise to what I am reading? Where do I experience confusion, disagreement, approval, or any other attitude or feeling? What experience does the text bring to mind that I can describe or narrate? You can also make short responses after the first reading. These responses may be appropriate for a journal entry, or you may write them as separate text. As soon as you finish reading the work, describe how you feel about it. Write a brief summary of the plot. Rewrite about a single line from a poem or about a sentence from a piece of prose. Identify a line or an image that immediately caught your attention or that you remember clearly. Why do you find it to be powerful? Think of someone or some experience that a character or situation in this work brings to your mind. List the things you like about the work. Why do you like them? List those aspects of it that bother you. Why do they bother you? Identify any passage you do not understand. Choose what would you tell someone about this work. If you could make only one comment, consider how you might have acted had you been one of the characters. What else would you like to know about the characters or events? What values, beliefs, or assumptions of your own does this work affirm? Which of your values, beliefs, or assumptions does it challenge? Compose a letter to the author or to the one of the characters. Speculate on who should play the various roles in a film version of the work. Curate a reader response, develop a clear thesis statement, and choose example passage from the text that support your thesis. Next, write an introduction paragraph that specifies the name of the text, the author, the subject matter, and your thesis. Then include 3 to 4 paragraphs that discuss and analyze the text. So, that is all about of my report. Again, my name is Michelle Esalis, and thank you for listening.
Good day, everyone. Now let's proceed to drafting and revising. First off, what is drafting? Drafting is the stage of writing process in which you develop a complete first version of a piece of writing. And revising, on the other hand, is a process of rereading a text and making changes in content, organization, sentence structures, and word choice. This is technically known as the last stage in the process of writing a piece of text. Now, why is drafting and revising important? Drafting and revising means re-seeing your document and changing, altering, and cutting aspects of your piece to make the document stronger, leaner, and more rhetorically effective. Strong revision strategies are crucial to not only producing a strong piece of writing, but also in becoming an efficient and successful writer. Let's proceed to introduction. Introduction, in writing introduction, begin by recounting an incident from the work that elicits a powerful reaction or quote a passage that holds a strong emotion for most readers. Because you are making a reader response analysis, it is appropriate to involve your audience in the introduction to your essay. One of the examples is the description of Edgar Allan Poe's mysterious stranger who suddenly appeared at the ball in Mask of the Red Death. This style is not likely provoking dullness and inattentive yawn to anyone who reads it, as it gives a thrill to them even in the most passive reader. An essay that begins by quoting such line from the text will catch a reader's attention, which can also lead to a more detailed examination of how the reader and the text are responsible for making the literary work. Now we have the body. In writing body, it should show how you acquired information about the text and what responses that information created. Body is the core of your paper, which explains how the text controls the reader's understanding and sympathies, and identify the personal materials you have put into the text and describe how the two interact to create the text. The highlight of writing the body is also your discussion. The discussion will center on the guidelines embodied in the text, like stereotypes, points of view, connotation, patterns, metaphors, and images that will guide your responses. It will question the accuracy of the information that is given and the reliability of the various characters who provide the information. It will remark on those instances in which only partial information is provided and where the reader knows more than the character know. Even points at which the reader is misled will also be significant. You may also want to describe your general impression of the work or how your initial impression of it changed to become your final judgment. You may even want to point out what you have found that was recognizable from your own experiences both personal and literary. Note, you have to note, you also have to note any incidents and characters that produce either validation of or challenge to your sense of the world. It is noticeable because of your own comfort or discomfort on meeting them. It may be helpful to profile the character with whom you most closely identified or the incident that gave you the most pleasure or pain. If you found yourself remembering a personal experience that made the text more credible or moving, you will want to include it in your discussion. If you supplied material by imagining events that did not actually take place, you should mention any fantasies or speculation that help explain a character's motivation or enhance a bit of action. If you made adjustments in how you initially saw the text so that it was more in keeping with your usual way of seeing things, you will have a direct means of discovering your part in making the text. Even the experiences you had before, even the experiences you had before reading it, may also be significant in explaining how you created the work. Finally, you might want to explain what resulted when the text and the reader came together. You may want to note how the text invites responses by predisposing the reader to read in certain ways. And you might also examine how the images provided by the text are modified by the reader's personal experience. Although the text provides certain norms or values, it is the reader who decides whether or not what degree they should be accepted or rejected. The critic's job is to raise meaningful questions and to look for meaningful answers. In the process, a new reading of the text may emerge, and the reader may be changed as well. The last part is the conclusion. The body of your analysis will have presented numerous observations backed up by even more citations from the text. The conclusion, then, is the place to pull all the disparate pieces of information together into generalizations about the text. It need not to be lengthy, but it should state the major effects the work has had on a reader and the causes that produce those effects. Finally, the conclusion should include an evaluation of how effectively the text elicited the desired responses, or how deeply the reader became involved in constructing the text. And lastly, and how the work was enriched by the mutual participation of text and the reader. In other words, how well did the process work? And I guess that's all with my report. Thank you for listening. Now let's proceed to the next reporter.
Good day everyone, my name is Hirana Asta. Today I'm going to discuss about the model student analysis entitled Discovering the Way the World Works, a reader response analysis of James Joyce's Araby. Araby is a short story by modernist writer James Joyce, who lived from 1882 to 1941. As with many stories by Joyce and other modernist writers, Araby employs a close first-person narrator describing the world as it appeals to his senses and learns the reader with only a suggested rather than outright moral resolution. Evidence from our own life tell us overwhelmingly that the actual working of the world rarely live up to the idealistic imagining of youth. Empirical experience make us aware that the world does not playing like a fairy tale, which means he reaches his conclusion only after filtering the empirical evidence of the world through his own perceptions and desires. This deeply personal quality is one of the reasons the story's ending has such staying, what they call that, staying power. The narrator's epiphany demonstrates that the ultimate meaning of experiences can be found at the intersection of empirical facts and how our individual perceptions organize those facts into nuggets of meanings. The text provides empirical evidences as well as authorical devices such as diction, allusion, and imagery that produce a specific range of rhetorical effects and guide our understanding of the story. These critics contend that each reader's subjective position alters the objective facts of any text and that, rather than ignoring these personal intrusions, a complete reading of any text should actively incorporate them into the act of criticism, such as new criticism or formalism. Reader response driven criticism of Arabi enables us to see that the ultimate meaning of Joyce's story is not something that can be pinned down conclusively, but rather a moving, evolving activity of participatory reading. The story opens with the narrator's description of his home and neighborhood, in which we first see Joyce's use the close first-person narrator to convey the full sensory range of sensory detail, the sight, smell, colors, and textures that that comprise the setting. And then, with the obsession established, the story then moves to how the narrator might act on that obsession, how he might obtain being this young in this young girl.
To sum it up, reader response criticism deals with the reader's response on a specific literary text or work, in which it involves here the reader's experience when it comes to interpretation of the text. So, writing a reader response criticism, it's like giving a feedback in such a way, analyzing the text systematically and lay down the elaborate points on what you like or dislike in the text. Agree or disagree if if the text provides its purpose, or you should know what's its purpose. I would like to end our presentation by leaving this quote of Ralph Waldo Emerson, an American essayist, poet, and philosopher, that it's the good reader that makes the good book. So thank you for listening and have a great day. Our group prepared a short assessment and it's already posted in the MS Team. So kindly click the link after watching our discussion. Thank you.